Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you doing today? How's life where you are? How's things in your world? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you. This is a bit of a disaster because I spent some time down here this weekend on a project. Actually ended up having a pretty interesting weekend, and in the process of all that, I decided I needed to come down here and work on this art box that I'm building for my daughter. And so I did, and I had a bit of a creative gluing situation. I'll show you. I'm getting to that. But because of the way I designed it, it wasn't really made... I don't know what I'm doing. Sorry if that was loud. This is a art box that'll have 3 drawers in it. I think you can kind of see the drawers that will live in this thing that she can put pencils in. These are really shallow, like half-inch depth drawers, and they'll fit in here. And yeah, it's an art box. What I didn't think about when I was cutting all this stuff out was how I was going to assemble it, and so it became kind of a bit of a guessing game. Like, oh, how am I going to assemble that? Because this is just 1/4-inch plywood with a 1/4-inch walnut banding on it to make it look pretty. And when I cut all of this, I didn't cut any kind of dados or anything in here to line this all up. So my thought process was, I'll just use the drawers and some cards or whatever as spacers to sit these shelf pieces on, and then just glue them to the sides. Well, what I realized quickly after starting this process was, once I got one side on, I used a couple little right angle clamp guides that my friend 3D printed for me. Thanks, Mike. And I got the 2 sides on. Then it was like, well, how do I get these shelves to slide down here without like glue mess everywhere? So instead of using the drawers, I used some spacers to sit in here. And what that allowed me to do was to put some blue tape along the insides here, run a bead of glue across basically the top of that blue tape. Then when I push this down, I kind of pulled out apart on these a little bit so I could shove down and then pull that tape out, and it's kind of okay. So it worked. But what I really wanted to talk to you about today was this is a new thing for me. This like doing real woodworking is what I'm going to call this. When I was a kid, we had a whole lot of construction lumber laying around in my dad's garage. He was kind of like Mr. Fix-It, you know, car guy, home repair. We had just miscellaneous stuff. So we had, you know, like electrical stuff, plumbing stuff, car stuff, wood stuff, you know, just a assortment of, you know, basically a hardware store. But I wanted to build a lot of things, and essentially the stuff that I had to build with was wood. Because I could weld, but not without, you know, supervision and that sort of stuff. So if I wanted to make something, I had hammer and nails and construction grade lumber. So often I would say, all right, I'm going to build a frame for a little go-kart. I used to build a lot of little like sit on top go-karts. They weren't powered, that had lawnmower wheels, and my parents lived on a hill. I could ride those to the bottom of the hill. So what I would always try to do was, say I'm going to cut a frame, I would try to cut pieces that are the same length and then put everything together. Well, what you realize is, if you're trying to cut 2 pieces to be the exact same length, that's really hard to do. It's actually very difficult, and especially when you don't have table saws, chop saws, some sort of way of putting a stop. When you're just doing it with hand tools, we had a circular saw. A lot of the stuff I made with just an actual hand saw. It's very, very hard to get things perfect. And so things I always made were never quite square. They were never quite right. And so this is a thing that I have learned recently, is to make everything big and then trim it later. And it makes a lot of sense. So in this particular case, I just made some, it's literally a case. I made some sides, and they're way too long. I think that's obvious. And what I'll do, now that this is glued together and is an assembly, I will just cut this off, and then I'll use a router bit to flush trim it to the rest so that it's nice and it's the same size. And I'm not working to a plan. I have absolutely no clue what this interior dimension is. This interior dimension is whatever the width of these shelves are. It doesn't matter. And I've been working to the size of the piece, not working to any plan. What's going to happen next is, once I trim these off, once I put a back on this to strengthen all this up, these will go inside of another case. So I'm going to have a walnut and cherry case that wraps this. The drawer fronts are cherry. This is walnut. I'm going to have a walnut frame, essentially, with a cherry panel in the middle. It'll wrap all of this. And that'll be cut long. I'll put it on, and then I'll trim it flush with the sides. And, you know, this is one of those few instances where overbuilding it or making it too big at first is actually usable. It's actually useful, you know, in woodworking. In metalworking, it's the opposite. Like, you can always make metal bigger. It's harder to make metal smaller accurately. So you can make metal bigger by welding on more metal or filling in your gaps with weld. With woodworking, though, it's better to kind of make things too big and then shrink it down later. And it's funny because, like, as a software developer, I do the opposite. I want to make it as small as possible first and then grow it, because over-engineering is a problem. And so I'm curious to know if you know of any other aspects of life where it's better to kind of build it bigger and then work it down into something better by removal as opposed to addition. That's what I want to know. How do you make things better by removing things? That's what I've got to do to that. That's the plan for this week. I'm going to keep kind of just spend a little bit of time here and there on it, and hopefully I can wrap it up, because I still have like a couple of orders of those nesting chairs to do for Christmas. So with that said, I'm going to cut this one off and say thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends, being wonderful people. I really appreciate you, and I will see you tomorrow. Alexa, tell me a random fact.
Almost every banana sold in the West is a Cavendish banana, descended from one banana plant grown in 1830 at Chatsworth House, England, for the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire, whose family name is Cavendish. That banana was gradually exported around the world, becoming dominant in the 1950s.
Yeah, and it doesn't taste like a banana. If you've ever had like wild bananas, they're amazing.